Hello, Wolf Pack. Welcome to Behind the Scenes. I'm Angela Wolf, and today we are finishing our Rachel twin set Sewalong. I'm very excited. I have my tank top cut out. I had a completely different idea. Well, not completely different, but different than when we talked last. So if you've never been here before, say hi, say where you're from. I see you all rolling in. Some of you were here even before I got here, which is fantastic. Great to see you all. We are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, so I would love to see you in any of those places. I've added a few more because I know some of you are getting off Facebook, so at least I can see where you are, right? Hey, everyone. And so I see you on both. So I know those two are working, which is fantastic. So by the way, did you get my newsletter? I just sent it out a few hours ago. If you did not, that means you're not on the list, or check your junk folder, because that's usually where our emails always go to, right? But in there are some discounts and announcing the new Embroidery 103 class with Cindy, and we are going to be embroidering hats. In fact, I just got a whole box of hats that you can use as a base for your embroidery. Now, I haven't added them to the website yet. I will be doing that tomorrow. But the discount code that I gave you is good till Monday for any, so you might want to wait till these go up there tomorrow. So I've got quite a few different colors, and then I have the new hats with the little ponytail spot in the back. So this is what we're going to be embroidering. The class will be next Friday at noon. And so you can always email me if you have questions on that. I also have 2 spots left in the jacket class, which is at the end of this month. You need to email me about that, though. That's a hands-on class. Let's see what else was in that newsletter. Just your live show schedule, recap, stuff like that. So if you didn't get it, message me and I'll make sure you're added to the list. And one thing I talked about was, did you have a good weekend for Easter? And for those of you that celebrate, of course, but maybe if you don't celebrate, you still had a nice weekend. But I know that Easter seems to be a time where a lot of people like to hide eggs in the yard. And I'm just curious if you did that and if you put chocolate treats with nuts in them. Because if you did, and you waited more than 2 hours, and you have squirrel friends like I do, I just want to know if they chewed through the eggs. Because that's what happened to us last year. My mom, we still laughed about it this time. We put little, let's see, I had Hershey Kisses with nuts. I had, oh goodness, a lot of fun candies. Some I don't even like chocolate, so for me it was like whatever. But it was pretty funny because, oh, hey, I see it, no problemo. Thanks, girls, for letting me know. Anyways, we put these all over the yard, and then the Easter Bunny stopped by and dropped some more off. And do you know, within 2 hours, little teeth cut through all the plastic and ate all the candies. So the kids were very disappointed, although it was quite a good laugh. So this year we had rolls of quarters. Everybody likes that, right? And then you have to just go buy the candies. You trade in the quarter for the candies. We had to come up with something really good on that. Oh, good, Esther, you got it. All right, I see another one. Boy, we have a busy day today. So, good morning, lovies. Did I get a purple hat? You know what, Arnell? I did not. And I don't even think they had a purple hat. If they do, though, I'll go back and look just to make sure. You'd have to have a purple hat. Oh, good. You got it, all of you. And Pam, I got your email. I'll be returning it after the show today. I just saw it. All right, so today we're going to take that tank top and I'm going to show you an idea of what I'm going to do with it. And I have actually, the problem when I have a whole bolt of fabric in 2 different colors is I can think of a whole bunch of designs. So I condensed it to 1, just 1. And I'm going to show you how to fix the tank. I'm going to layer it. So you can see the top behind me. That's what we're working on. There's the jacket. That's pretty much finished. I haven't done the narrow edged hem yet. I'm going to do it on the serger. You know what, though? I was looking at some of the decorative stitches on the Luminaire, and there's a couple there I want to test just to see what it looks like on knits. I don't know. I'm experimenting, right? And the other thought was to add some embroidery, but I haven't added that yet. That'll be an extra for later. So, all right. So would you like me, Ricky, would you say your squirrels sit and look at you? Oh, that's so funny. Well, by the way, speaking of squirrels, if you do feed your squirrels like I do, and mine are they've called all their friends, they had all their relatives come over this weekend. Well, they have some new babies. And guess what? They are not afraid of anything. And so I have a whole bin, kind of like a dog food bin, right by the back screen door where I have all the nuts, and I just throw some out. Well, this morning I was working on your newsletter, and I'm hearing this little scratch, scratch, scratch. And do you know that one of those little squirrels got in between my sliding glass door and the screen? It was up on his back legs, eye to eye with that thing of nuts. Oh my gosh. Entertainment, right? Why do I know one of these days I'm going to get home and that thing's going to be in the house? And then we're going to really have to name him. But for now, let's go back to sewing. Okay, so what I have ready, I have all set up. I'll meet you at the table. I'm just going to take this. There you go. Got it. Okay, I'll meet you over here. Nope, not there. Here. I never get it right, do I? And hopefully you can see that okay. Okay, let me go show you what I'm going to do. So, I was already working on this. This is Fashion Sewing Club. We're finishing it today. I was going to do it before the show and I didn't have time, so I'm doing it with you today. We're going to be attaching lace. That's our Fashion Sewing Club this afternoon, and I can hardly wait to wear that. So excited. And I'll also, in Fashion Sewing Club, be announcing our new project for the next month. So remember, I have two colors here that I wanted to work with. So I've already cut the front and the back, two of them. So do you remember me talking about if you're using a knit that's too lightweight? And that could really depend where you live. So is your knit, you want it to be a little thicker. Maybe you don't, now this knit is what we call soft teak, and it's a rayon. It's not too light for me, especially if you add some ruching. But I have quite a few times when I use rayon, I'll use 2 layers of fabric. Why? Well, you can't see through it. 2, you can't see any bra lines or anything like that. But for this one, I'm only doing it for color. So it's still going to look good. It's still going to fit the same, but I need to make a few changes. So let's go back over there. Oh, I did it again. Wrong one. All right, so here I have, this is the front. How do I know? Because you can see a lower neckline and it curves right here, which is where I did the full bust adjustment. So I'm just going to lay this in half. So how I'm going to do this top is I'm going to treat both layers like one. But I want it to peek out a little bit. So my thought was, now I don't know if it's going to work or not, but I'm going to try it. So I need to lay these both on top of each other. Now I have 2 ideas. I love raw edges in knits. So I'm going to start with what we're going to do to the top. You can see that pretty good, I think, right here. And now let's take the back piece. I'm going to do the same thing to the back. Layer them here. Okay, so there's both layers again. Why am I layering on top of each other? Because I'm going to alter them exactly the same. So for the neckline, I have cut just, here's a binding that I've cut 2 inches wide, because when I fold it in half, obviously it's not totally straight, but I'll make sure I straighten that out. What I'll do is I'll go press this too. So here's part of my binding. And we talked about this a little bit last week, but not totally. I didn't have all the pieces cut out. All right, and I also have this color where I cut out, this one's 3 inches wide. So again, I'll take this, give it a good pressing so it stays in half. And you can either use your pattern piece for this, or just, you know, I usually measure around the neckline and give myself some extra and pin it in place. Ideally, your neckline should be, take this amount plus the back neck. Make sure you have seam allowances on here that you need to take away. So usually I'll sew the shoulders together, then measure around there and take away 1 to 2 inches. It depends on how stretchy your fabric is, because you want your binding to be less in width than your neckline. Okay, so here is this part here. And then if I take this on top of it, I'm just going to put a couple pins in place so you can see what I have here. There. So now this is going to be my binding. So if you can imagine, once I attach this to the neckline, I'll just use this as a little example here, you'll be able to see parts of the yellow and the orange, or coral, I should say, peeking out. Now I could also do that on the armholes. Another way to do the armholes, I'll just slide this in place so you can see what it would look like. And when I do this, the yellow's only going to peek out a little bit, but it'll definitely bring in a little tie into the jacket, and it really looks classy. Another idea for you, for those of you that like raw edges, is that I could take, when I treat all this as one layer, I could sew together the peach, or coral I should say, and then sew together the yellow, and take the hem on the coral, tuck it under, and then use the pretty thread, which I know some of you thought this was a lot brighter than the yellow, but once it's on the fabric, it matches perfectly. And do a nice cover stitch here. And then this edge here would be raw, which is a very trendy look with some raw edges. Another idea, am I giving you enough ideas, by the way? Another idea would be to trim off some of this coral. Pretend that was a raw edge and I trimmed it off. I'll just slide it down a little bit so you can see. And then do a cover stitch along the edge just to hold those layers together. And then what do you have? 2 raw edges. So it really depends if you want a really refined fit look or if you want the raw edges. Well, I'm going to combine both of these. So for the neckline and for the armhole, I'm going to go ahead and add the double binding. I just think that looks really classy. It looks very finished. And then for the hem, I'm going to leave raw edges, and I'll show you how I'm going to do that. So because I'm adding a wider binding than what the pattern asks for, right now I have my seam allowance on here, which I need, but I'm going to need, if I want to have this along the binding, that's quite a bit of fabric, right? So I need to cut away some of this armhole. So I'm just going to measure. Let's see how much extra. It should be about inch. If I'm going to stitch this in place here, then I have a 1/2 inch seam allowance, which will take me to here. I have an extra, looks like 3/4 of an inch I need to get rid of. So just to be safe, I'm going to cut off a 1/2 inch because I'd rather have more room for my tank top. You don't want to cut it too low down here, remember, but if I take away a 1/2 inch, that's going to be fine. Okay, so I'm just going to eyeball this. And if you want to measure it, just to make sure, you can. Let's just see how close I got to a 1/2 inch. Pretty darn close. Okay. And now I need to cut a 1/2 inch on this side. Why am I doing that? I'm cutting away some of this seam allowance so I have room for that beautiful double binding. Perfect. What about the neckline? I'm not too worried about the neckline, except for the fact, because it's already kind of low, so I don't have to worry about much on the front, but the back, otherwise this will shove up into your neck. So I'm just going to cut away a little bit extra on the back. I'm doing not quite a 1/2 inch, maybe 3/8 of an inch. And I'm just guessing, by the way. There's no math. I'm just kind of guessing of how I want this to look. And then the only other thing I need to check is, once I sew this together, do I need to get rid of some of this back? I'm going to cut some of this away. when you start cutting things up, you need to make sure certain things match, like my shoulder seams. Those need to be the same width, right? This neckline, I think, is going to look great. Okay, so now I'm going to sew together the shoulders, treating both of these fabrics as one. Now, you don't have to, though. You could just sew this together and then sew the yellow together if that makes it easier for you. It really doesn't matter. But when it comes to the hem, I'm going to leave a part of this raw. Actually, I'm going to leave both edges raw. So I'm going to make sure they're nicely cut, really straight. Make sure they're even here. Actually, I'll bring this way. I think I can cut better and my arms won't be, it's a better angle. My arms won't be stuck in the middle of what you're trying to watch, right? Okay. First off, let's just make sure both of these are even. I always cut my tops a little longer than the patterns. It just gives me a little leeway if I want them to be longer. All right. Now, when I go to sew the sides together, I want to make sure that I have a little bit of the yellow peeking out. It will tie in with the jacket. It will tie in with this binding, which we're going to be using, at the shoulders and the armholes. Let me just lay that here. So to remind you, that's what it's going to look like. So I'm just going to cut this about, let's go, I'll line it up, just about 1/2 inch shorter than the yellow. I'm using this line here as a guide in case you're wondering. There. Now when I sew my top together, my yellow is going to stick out just a little bit further. I'll have 2 raw edges, and I'll run my cover stitch, my double cover stitch, just about maybe 1/4 inch above this raw edge. And that way both edges will be raw, and I'll have this beautiful edging at the bottom. If I don't like it, guess what? If you sew this together and you're like, I don't like that, well, then you can turn this up and hem it as a worst case scenario. So that is what I have decided to do. I'll come over here and see your thoughts on this. I think it's going to look great, Angie. I totally agree. And I gave you a ton of ideas, so I cannot wait to see what you do. So you know what next week is? Next week is show and tell. So I want to see all of your tops. Be sure to post them in Angela Patterns or on Instagram and tag me. There's my Instagram handle. And I'm going to compile all of your photographs for next week's live show. Can you do it reversible? Karina, yes, you could do it reversible. So if you decided to do the tank reversible, the only thing you'd want to watch for is you probably wouldn't want to alter that hemline quite like that because it would look kind of weird. But if you decide to do reversible, then you would need to sew each tank top separately and then make sure that the inside is so you'd have right sides facing out on both sides instead of 2 right sides facing out. Got it? All right, let's see. Any other questions for you? Is there a way, Mary, is there a way to make a double color around the neck with raw edges? Yeah, so you could actually do exactly what I did at the hemline. You could just take 2 pieces of fabric instead of folding it over like ribbing, just take 2 pieces of fabric the same way, but 1 layer. So with the ribbing, we have it folded over and I made a nice finished ribbing. If you don't want that, then just take 1 layer of each fabric and sew it in like a ribbing. Because if you're using that 1 layer of fabric, make sure you're still cutting it on the grain line where it's the stretchy side with ribbing, just like you would have ribbing. That way when you attach it, Mary, it's just like you attach it anytime where the ribbing's a little bit tighter. Even if it's just 1 layer of fabric, that's fine. So if you have 1 layer of the coral and 1 layer of the yellow, whatever you have, right side's facing out. You'll attach it here. Make sure that you stretch that ribbing from here to here to keep that collar nice and tight. Now I'm wearing a cowl neck right now, so that's not going to help teaching that, right? Janice, how about lettuce edge at the neck and armhole with both colors showing? So Janice, you could do a lettuce edge, but here's a little tricky part. If you do a lettuce edge at the neckline, at the with the raw fabric, and you do it here, you need to do something to stabilize the neckline and stabilize the armhole. So maybe you could go ahead and do a double cover stitch all the way around that seam and all the way around this seam, and then attach a neckline with a lettuce edge. The thing with the lettuce edge is it stretches the fabric. So if you do that along here and along here without stabilizing that area, you might have a little bit of a hot mess as far as like the fabric just kind of sticking up. It would kind of look like, what's that commercial where the person's at dinner and his collar's all like wrinkly and messed up and all whacked out? That's what you'd look like. It would look like, okay, we'll just stop that. I think you got the idea. Definitely. And yes, Susan, it could be trimmed afterwards. It could be at the end where you think, you know, do I want to trim the bottom hem one shorter, one not? Unless you're sewing both layers together. So if you've got that coral and the yellow and you're sewing it together as if it's one top and you're sewing the side seams together, then you need to trim it in advance. If you're just sewing two tank tops, piecing them together and putting in the binding, then you have more flexibility. No, there's Marie. It could be reversible, just like I said to Karina. It definitely could. How much less? How much less did I cut? So hopefully I answered that, Angie, when I went through that. So I cut it about 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch in those areas. Now, with the tank top, you could always turn it into a racerback tank top, which would be a little sportier. And you could do that here as well, which would be very cute. I don't seem to wear those as much as I used to, just because I don't like my bra straps to show. But I mean, you could always buy one that has like the X in the back. But if you want to change this, let me just show you real quick, because this would be really cute. Let's see if I can get the right camera this time. There we go. I got it this time. Yay. Okay, so if you want to do more of a racerback style, or you want to alter more of the armholes on here, the front you really don't have to do much with, except unless you want to keep this a little bit shorter at the shoulder. And if you decide to do that, I would leave the underarm where it is. Try not to alter under here, because that makes it just too low. But from here up, if you want to go more of a racerback, start about here and follow my finger, where you just kind of go just like that. Here I would be taking off about 1 inch. So then for the back side, what you would do is you would start in 1 inch right here, and you can take this way in and right back out. Just think though about the bottom 2 inches of your armhole. Try to leave that and then go over. And that would be a very cute racerback style. In fact, I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to do a racerback style, but I'm going to leave my shoulders where it is. So here, this is my back piece. I'm not going to do anything to the front. Actually, because I have 4 layers of knit, I'm going to use my scissors. There. Now there's my back piece. Now, just for the record, this area here looks awfully close to my front neckline, so I have to make sure I sew this correctly, or this could end up being kind of like a really bad accident. So this is my back piece. This is my front. The other thing is, maybe instead of a rounded neckline, you want to go with a V-neck. It would be very cool. Just, you know me, more ideas for you. It would be super cool if you had a V-neck where you had, let's just say you had this part meeting and then the other part crossing over right there. That would look very cool as well. But for now, I'm not getting into a tutorial on that. We're just going to do the racerback tank top with the 2 layers. And I think that's going to be pretty easy. If you have any issues while you're sewing this, Oh, sorry. I left your comment up there, Angie. Sorry about that. Just wanted to make sure everybody knew you were here. When you do that, though, if you have difficulties sewing with knits at all, if you're a new knit sewer, I should say, you might want to baste the binding together, the 2 layers of binding together first before you attach. I probably will do that unless I press it and use clips or pins to hold it. And then the shoulders is not a big deal, but for the binding, you might want to baste that together. All right, any more questions for me? Oh, bye, Jenny. Have a great day. Back at work. Janet, which way are you going to sew it together? You know, I'm going to sew it with all the seams together. I'm going to sew it as one tank top. In fact, I have the serger set up, but it has the wrong color thread, but I don't think it'll really matter. You're not going to see it. I'll just do the shoulders so you can kind of see how that's going to work out. Any other questions for me before I go to the serger? Hi, Sandra. Okay. I think that's good. So let's go to the serger. Let me make sure the camera's still working. That's blinky and it's not Friday, but for some reason, she's not on. So let me just check the camera real quick and make sure that it's plugged in. Or if it doesn't, then I'll just take you over to sewing machine. There we go. Okay, let's go to the sewing machine. Take that down just a little bit so it's not in your way. All right. So, oh, you know what? Before I do that, you need to see this part or you're going to wonder what the heck I'm taking to the cover stitch or to the serger. Sorry. Let's go back here for a second. So to do this, you're going to pin this fabric as if it was 1. So let me just check. I did not mark the wrong side, so I got to get my glasses just to make sure these knits look so similar as far as the front and the back. All right. This is the right side, and this is the right side. So this is the back, and I'm just going to put a few pins. I usually use clips when I'm sewing with knits, but as long as I pin just in the seam allowance, it won't puncture my fabric, and I am using glass head pins, so they shouldn't puncture the fabric either. Now, when I cut my hem longer on this top, I eyeballed it on the front and the back, so if for some reason my front does not match up to my back, I'll make those adjustments before I sew it. You know me, I'm always just making up changes as I work on these things. All right, and then this side. Now, the one thing I need to really make sure is that both of these are cut the exact same width. If there was any changes or adjustments that were different, I just have to make sure that even if this is off by just a little bit, that both layers lay totally flat. Because if you have one layer that's tighter than the other, it's going to look really bad. All right, so there's my back piece ready to sew. So that's what I mean by sewing it as one. There's the shoulders. And now let's go ahead and line up our front. That's the right side, and this is the right side. Boy, this one's really hard to tell. This is the right side. Get all my lint off of there. Now I'm putting these pins kind of a little cockeyed here to make sure that I see them when I'm piecing this together, because you absolutely do not want to run the serger over one of these pins. That's an absolute no way, Jose. So you can see up here, if you wanted this just to be raw edges, you could just have not even add a binding if you didn't want to. But I'm going to finish my edges. I'll put a few pins just to hold this neckline in place. Now, do not baste this fabric together. I know some of you might think, well, you know what, I'll just baste this together like I do with my quilting. No, 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 because you will end up with holes in this fine knit fabric and then you'll be not happy. All right, so there are my sides. Again, I'm going to put these out at just a little angle so I don't miss any of these when I'm pinning this all together. All right, so I can see that my yellow's cut just a little bit smaller than my other one. So I can either trim this up, but what I'll do is I'll just make the seam allowance just a little bit smaller. It's a knit, I'll be fine. Slide this down a little bit so you can see. And let's go ahead and sew this other, pin this other shoulder together. So I'm basically taking what I just did and now pinning all 4 layers together. You might need to use a new needle for this. And if you're worried, like, oh my gosh, I don't know if my serger will go through all this. Well, it should, by the way, with no problem. Or if using a sewing machine, I would use a number 11 ballpoint needle for this. And maybe you want to just baste this together first, just to be safe. And that way, when you run it through the serger, you can make sure, you can also try it on real quick to make sure that it fits okay. That's always a good idea too. Which in fact, that's probably what I'll do. Just to make sure, because I cut the top a little bit looser than I wanted, just to see if I can, I just kind of wanted a loose top to go over my jeans. Now, here's something, as I'm pinning this, that you're going to need to keep in mind. Remember I told you that I eyeballed it when I cut my hems just a little bit longer? As I get down here, I realize that I really eyeballed it. So this is actually about 1 inch shorter than this. So now what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to pin this all the way around to make sure that I did this right, but I'll need to trim this coral here to match the front. Or is that the back? I don't know. I'm going to need to cut the front to match the back. These both need to be exact. So I'm going to leave that open for now and then go pin the other side and see if it's that way on both sides. That's what I get for cutting and not measuring, right? But I knew that when I did it, so. Yeah, so this side is exactly the same. So I'm just going to put a pin here and then leave this. Because now what I need to do is take this, make sure that my yellows are cut exactly the same length, and make sure that my corals are cut exactly the same length. So if I lay these on top of each other here, I know they're hard to see when they're right there close together, but I'm just going to cut the coral piece here. This color is so beautiful. I have a feeling I'm going to have a completely interchangeable wardrobe by the time I'm finished with this, and there's going to be an awfully lot of coral in it. So now these two match up. That was really important. And now I need to have the yellow match up. So I'm going to go ahead and pin this just to make sure that it still matches. Everything's in the right spot. Don't stretch that side seam when you sew it. All right, and now let's check this side. Okay, now on the sides, my yellow's matching up as well. So these will be your next steps. Now that you have this entirely pinned together, go to the sewing machine. I would recommend going to the sewing machine first. I'm going to go ahead and pin my armholes just so they stick together just a little bit while I'm sewing. But you're going to sew together. You can either baste it. I would probably just run a basting stitch through the shoulders and the side seams. Remove the pins, try it on, see how it looks. If you need to take it in a little bit more, take it in. Obviously, you can't let it out. And then the next step will be to run it through the serger, finish the edges. If you don't have a serger, I would use a zigzag stitch on here just to make sure that when you put this on and off, it doesn't stretch out. And then the last step will be to add the binding to your armholes and your neckline. Your hem, you're going to leave raw. All right, I'll come take your questions. And I know I'm not going to sew that live because I'm going to run it to the basting and then I'm going to try it on, which again, I'm not going to do live. All right. I'm just reading your comments. Let's see, will this? Oh, Phyllis, that's a good question. Will it be hot with all those layers? Well, rayon's not breathable. And I have quite a few tops out of rayon where I did a V-neck. Yeah, it was a V-neck where I did 2 layers for a tank top. They're absolutely my favorite tank top in the summer because what I did is I did a V-neck, sewed both layers together, and then flipped the inside layer in. So I had 2 layers of a tank top, but it had a really clean neckline. Favorite tank top. Absolutely was not warm. Now, if you're using a polyester or something like that, that can get a little warm. But for the rayon knit, not at all. And I wore them all the way from fishing in fishing here in Michigan to fishing in Florida, which is really hot in the summer, and no problem at all. Good question, though. And it is, Susan. So interesting part about this knit, and Susan, you have some, so you can really, attest to that. When you sew the rayon, you want to sew it before you cut it because it does shrink a little bit. But when you wash it, it actually it becomes a little thinner than even when you purchase it. Just a little bit, but it's very comfortable. Rayon makes a beautiful fitted knit, loose knit, any kind of knit top. Rayon is absolutely my favorite. I have a few more colors coming. Right now I still have, let's see, we still have about a quarter of a bolt of coral, 1 bolt of yellow left, and I just got a new bolt of green in again, so I have more green in. And then I have black and white, which I'm going to try to keep stocked because I love that, especially when it comes to dyeing. I agree. All right, so this was a wonderful show today. The schedule for the week this afternoon is Fashion Sewing Club, which I'll be sewing that lace on, finishing my lace top, and announcing our new sewing project. So the new sewing project for Fashion Sewing Club is going to be like a process where you're going to start with one thing, and then it's going to grow into different designs. So that'll be kind of fun, something different. I'll just wait one more second if you have questions for me. Otherwise, so we have Fashion Sewing Club today at 4:30. Notice the time change. Originally it was 4, but I had to move it to 4:30. Tomorrow at noon, I believe, is Heather Banks working on the scare and cut, which is going to be so much fun. And I think that's it for this week. It's hard to tell. These weeks go flying by, right? All right, well, I don't see any more questions. I hope you all have a fabulous day. Oh, wait, I forgot one thing. Friday, Fashion Sewing Club, we have our fabric stash sale because last week, for some reason, the internet was very low, which I have no idea why, but you know, what are you going to do, right? I think it sounds fabulous. All right, everyone. And those of you, have a wonderful day. If you're not in the Angela Wolf Patterns group to share your stuff for next week, it's show and tell. It's free to join Angela Wolf Patterns group. So just pop in, share what you're working on. We'd love to see it. Plus, it's inspiring for everyone, right? I think so, at least. All right. Have a good day.